Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today's Wellbeing webinar. I am joined by Natalie Martin, and we are going to go through a presentation for healthy snacks for work and play. So talking about healthy snacking, but also Natalie is going to take us through an actual food demo. So it'll be a lot of fun. Just as a quick reminder, any questions, comments you have, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will go ahead and keep those available for everybody and answer those questions at the end. Also, today's presentation is being recorded. So if you have a coworker who wasn't able to join, if you'd like to share it with someone afterwards, please know that anybody who registered for today's webinar will get an email after the presentation. In there will be a link to the recording, as well as Natalie is going to share her secret recipe that she'll be going over today, and then an educational handout on healthy snacks. So with that, I will go ahead and turn things over to Natalie. The other thing I'll let you know about at the very end of the presentation, when you close out of the Zoom, it's going to look like just a regular web page, but there will be a survey at the end. We would love to hear feedback from you. Your feedback is very much welcomed just because it helps us know what content you're looking for, as well as help us make improvements for the future. So with that, Natalie, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Hello, everyone. Glad to have you here. And today we'll be talking about healthy snacks for work and play. And March is National Nutrition Month. So we wanted to bring you something specific to nutrition, but really to get on a specific topic that a lot of you probably have in your life every day is snacking. So that's what we'll be discussing today. To start out here, introducing myself, my name again is Natalie Martin. I'm a registered dietitian and exercise physiologist. I'm based out of the Indianapolis area, and excited to be bringing to you this recipe and some information on nutrition. So what we'll be talking about today, of course, we get to start out with some polls. We always try to make these interactive so we can hear from you and see where you're at right now with your snacking. And then we'll talk about, is snacking smart? And we'll look at what the experts say and what the research says. And then we'll talk about some pros and cons of snacking, and then some tips and even some examples of some good snacks. And then we'll get to the fun part, the food demo. So our first poll that Jessica's going to launch for us, on a typical day, how many snacks do you eat? 0, 1, 2, 3, or do you snack all day? So go ahead and answer the poll. And just to clarify, so snacks are just defined as food consumed between meals. So rather than breakfast, lunch, dinner, in between those times.
Perfect. And we've got about 70% of people that have voted at this point. We'll leave the polling up for just another second, but then we can go ahead and share those results with you. All right, and just for time's sake, I'll go ahead and end it and share those results.
Perfect. So it looks like we're across the board here. So right in the middle, 2 snacks a day is the most popular. Nearly half of you having 2 snacks a day, about 19% 1 snack a day, and just 3% 0, and then 3 snacks a day at 20%, and then snacking all day at 12%. So we've got a nice bell curve there across the board. So this is obviously a relevant topic for many of you. So thanks for sharing. And now we're going to have our second poll here. So digging a little deeper into snacking. So when you are, the 97% of you that are snacking, when I'm in the mood for a snack, I'm usually looking for something crunchy, sweet, salty, refreshing, filling, or of course, all of the above is an option too.
That's a hard one, Natalie. I'm not going to lie. I think I tend to go for all of them all in the same day, unfortunately. So excited
well,
to hear
that's why we have all of the above.
Perfect.
If all of those sound good.
I will go ahead and end those poll. Thanks everyone for sharing, and then here's the results.
Yeah, so what kind of snackers do we have? So all of the above, Jessica, like you mentioned, that's a popular one with nearly half of you. So crunchy, about 12%, sweet, 18%, salty, 10%, refreshing, 4%, and then filling, 8%. So we're actually going to talk about and have some resources that can meet all of those snacking needs. But thanks for sharing, and it's great to know the snacking habits of those of you all, so that we can make sure to cater this discussion to your snacking preferences. So is snacking smart? That's the question we'll pose. And someone, there seems to be just a general consensus that snacking is okay if you're having a healthy snack, but other things to think about: activity level, personal preference, why you're snacking, the types of snack you're choosing. So there's a lot that goes into this question. So ultimately, it depends if snacking is a good idea, and we'll dive deeper into these specific topics, but it's not a black or white topic. It's not something that we can say, yes, snacking is good and you have to do it, or no, it's bad and you need to avoid it. So looking at what the experts say, so looking at associations that have presented information on this topic, the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics said, if it's planned right, then snacking can be a good idea, and even gives a calorie amount. So 200, 300 for those who are less active, about 300 calories for a snack for those who are more active. So being really specific on, yes, if it's planned right, and here's some guidelines for the amount of calories in a snack. Harvard Health, again, as long as you are choosing foods that fit into a healthy lifestyle, then snacking can be a good idea. And then some additional recommendations. You'll see that overall there's a general consensus that snacking is not a bad thing and can be beneficial if you're choosing healthful foods in the right amount. So that's what the experts say, and certainly there's a lot of research behind that guides these recommendations. So more specific research. So research has been done to just assess the nutrition intake of wide variety of people. So this specific study, over 11,000 participants, and what they found when analyzing the diet quality of adults is that those who do snack end up having more nutrient-dense diets. So what does that mean? That means that those diets are more likely to meet the needs when it comes to nutrients like your calcium or your iron. So more likely to get those into your diet when snacking. And that does make sense, because if you're eating more often, there's more opportunity to get those in. And those who do snack, it was found that they're more likely to get more fruits, more whole grains, both beneficial. However, those who snack also had some more salt within their diet, which is consistent with some of you who maybe were craving something salty, and less vegetables for those who snack. So that's interesting, and again brings us back to the point that really what we're snacking on is important. So we're going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of snacking, and the positives. Snacking can serve a purpose, a very positive purpose, especially if we're making those healthful choices. So maybe adding those nutrients, like we just talked about, meeting our calcium, protein, iron needs. Also, if we're exercising, it can serve a purpose to fuel that exercise and help us to get a good workout, giving us energy throughout the day. So there's certainly some positives to snacking. If we look at the cons that might be associated with snacking, typical snack foods often are higher in things like calories, fat, sugar, salt. If you look down the snack food aisle, this becomes apparent fairly quickly. Most of our typical snack foods are going to be more dense in calories and fat. So if you think of like the typical potato chip. So that's one downside to snacking if we are choosing those less healthful snack foods. Potential weight gain, so going back to the more calories, there's of course room for weight gain if we're eating too many calories. Mindless snacking, so if we're snacking while driving or in front of the TV, then it's easy to mindlessly consume a lot of extra calories during the day and then end up getting more than we need. And then finally, filling an emotional need. So the why behind the snacking, if we're not necessarily hungry, but doing it for emotional reasons, then that can of course be a downside to snacking. So some just healthy snacking tips. So we talked about the pros and cons, and is snacking a good thing? So if we're going to choose to snack, then how can we make it a healthful snack? So choosing whole, minimally processed options. So what does that mean? A whole minimally processed option might be an apple or some carrots and hummus. So something that's not highly processed, like a potato chip or cookies, those are more processed. But the whole minimally processed foods are going to give us more nutrients and really help our snack work for us rather than against us. Something else to think about if we're looking for something that's giving us energy and keeping us satisfied is to include components, foods that have the components such as fiber and protein and fat. So these help us to stay full longer. And by including them, we can, maybe bridge the gap between breakfast and lunch with an energizing and sustaining snack that includes these components. And an example might be, rather than just having an apple, if you spread some nut butter on that apple, then you're adding that additional protein and fat to make it more sustaining. To do this, it's a lot of times appropriate to combine foods. So we end up combining the celery sticks and the hummus. We're combining the dried fruit and the nuts to get these components that make it more sustainable. Another tip is just simply asking yourself, am I truly hungry? And so this is a trick that's been helpful for some people before opening the refrigerator or opening the pantry door, asking, am I really hungry? Do I need to have this snack? If the answer is no, then maybe you're just looking for an activity, or it's out of boredom, or maybe need a drink of water. If you're truly hungry, then yeah, fueling yourself with that snack. So that can be a great tip just to prevent that emotional or mindless snacking. Preparing ahead of time, I think this one can often be the biggest contributor to healthy snacking in the long term, as doing some preparation. So maybe that looks like filling small individual size baggies or containers with a trail mix so that you can have them in your car or in your purse or on the go, or slicing up the veggies to go with your hummus at the beginning of the week. So there are certainly ways to prepare ahead of time so that you set yourself up for success, and it makes it a lot easier to avoid stopping into a gas station that has maybe less healthful choices by preparing ahead of time. And then finally, portions, which is always important, even if we're eating something very healthy, like almonds, we can have a handful or two, and it can be a great energizing, sustaining snack. But if we eat the whole container, then that's certainly more than what we need for a snack. So even those foods that have a health halo, we still want to be mindful of the portions. So some tips to keep in mind when you are choosing your snacks. So going back to our second poll about the different types of snacks, here are some examples. If you're looking for something refreshing, you'll see some fruits. If you're looking for something crunchy, maybe some air pop popcorn or some nuts. So this offers some examples based on the preference that you usually find yourself leaning towards. So what we'll be doing is, after this presentation, Jessica's going to send you all not only the recipe, but also a handout about snacking. And this information is included on the handout. So you have a takeaway with some ideas to incorporate some healthy snacks. Okay, so we are to the fun part of the food demo. And today we're going to be making a plant-based queso dip. And we wanted to bring you a way that you could add another healthy food to your snack routine. And this plant-based queso dip pairs great with veggies, just any raw veggie sticks. And a lot of people will use hummus to dip their veggie sticks. And this gives you something a little different. And it's plant-based because it's made out of raw cashews and then has several spices to give it a really nice flavor. So again, this is a great alternative as a veggie dip. It also can be used on a variety of other recipes that we'll talk about. So now what I'll be doing is switching over to the demo where you'll be able to watch me demonstrate making this recipe. Okay, so here's our demo station here with our ingredients as well as the queso. So we're quickly going to walk through making this simple queso, and it's a no-bake dish, so no cooking required, but we're just throwing things together into a food processor and blending it up. So our first ingredient is raw cashews. And I say raw cashews because that is important. We don't want roasted cashews or we don't get quite the same creamy finish. So I prefer raw cashews, and these you can find at most grocery stores. And you certainly can use like roasted or salted cashews, but you won't get quite the same creamy finish. And the first step is to take these raw cashews and soak them in warm water for about 20 minutes. And I went ahead and did this so you can see what it looks like after the cashews are soaked. You can see that they really soaked up a lot of that water and are much larger than they started. And this helps with the creaminess as well. So the first step is actually to drain these cashews. So we'll drain out the soaking water and then add them to the food processor. And this food processor that I'm using is a Ninja brand food processor where the motor goes on top. And there's two blades, it's called an S blade, that both spin simultaneously and really can create a nice and creamy finished product. Our next ingredient is a half a cup of almond milk. So we had a half a cup of raw cashews, half a cup of almond milk. This is of course a plant-based queso dip, so I'm using almond milk. You could certainly use other plant-based milk, whether it be soy or oat or hemp seed. There's so many options out there, but I'm using an almond milk for this recipe, and I'm adding that to the food processor. And the next ingredient here is nutritional yeast. And this may be a new ingredient for some of you. And I'm using 1 tablespoon of nutritional yeast. And what nutritional yeast is a deactivated yeast. So it's related to the yeast that we would put in bread and other products, but it's deactivated. So we certainly don't want to use a yeast that we use to make a bread. We want to make sure it's nutritional yeast, and this can be found in most grocery stores, either in the health food section or I've seen it in the baking section, but it's just some flakes or powder with a yellow color, and it gives this really nice cheesy flavor. After that, we've got 1/4 cup of salsa, and this really allows you to make this recipe your own. So I'm using a medium salsa. If you like it a little spicier, you could use a hot salsa or a mild salsa. So you can adjust the spiciness during this step, which of course is great for making it unique to you and your family. Our next ingredient is turmeric. And that's this bright yellow ingredient that I have here. And this ingredient is really widely studied for its anti-inflammatory properties. So a lot of research, and you've maybe seen it referenced as a superfood, and it does have a lot of anti-inflammatory properties, making it beneficial to add to multiple recipes. Another benefit is that it offers a really nice yellow color. So it's going to give this that cheese-like look at the end so that we can have that queso look and feel to this recipe. Our next ingredient is cumin. So this is simply ground cumin, a spice that you can find at most grocery stores. And we're doing half of a teaspoon of turmeric and half a teaspoon of ground cumin. Turmeric is also at most grocery stores with the rest of the spices. So most of these ingredients, while some are unique, you should be able to find them at most grocery stores. And so our next step of this recipe is putting on the lid and blending this for about a minute. And I won't be doing that today for the sake of time, and it'd be quite noisy, but we do have the finished product here. So you'll blend it for about a minute, and it gets a really nice creamy consistency, like a dip. And the benefit of that is it's got really good mouthfeel for that, higher fat content of the cashews results in a really nice creaminess, and then all the flavors are fully immersed. And it can be served either cold or also if you wanted to heat up and serve it warm. I have it here on my serving tray with some veggies, and it pairs great with many veggies. You'll see that the final product is a nice dip texture, and you can certainly top it with red pepper flakes or parsley or chives if you want to make it fancy for a special occasion. But again, our last step was just simply to puree it in the food processor for about a minute, and then it's ready to enjoy. And if you want to store it, if you don't eat it all in one sitting, then you can store it in the refrigerator for about up to a week. The last thing I'll mention about ingredients, we used the raw cashews for this recipe, and of course our nuts do have a higher fat content, which many of those fats are a healthy fat. But if you're someone who's looking for a lower fat option, then what you can do is substitute this half a cup of raw cashews with a half a cup of white beans. I've done that before. It works very well, and you don't have to do that soaking step, and you'll still get a really flavorful and creamy finished product. So that's our queso. Now we'll turn it back over to Jessica to do another quick poll.
Perfect, Natalie. Thank you so much for going through that. I have 2 questions, if you don't mind going through that before I pull that poll up. The blender you're using, is there any specifics that we should be trying to purchase if we are looking to buy a new blender?
Yeah, great question. This is, like I mentioned, a Ninja food processor, and I think it comes out to about $40, so fairly affordable. The key is that it has that double blade. So in a blender, it does not quite move the ingredients down quite as well, so you don't get quite as creamy of an end product, though it does work. But as long as it has that S blade, that is what's going to really move the nuts and the ingredients through and then end up as a great product. So that's what I would recommend.
Perfect, thank you. And the other question, I do have a handful that are coming in, but as far as, since you just went through the plant-based queso, any nut alternatives?
So nut alternatives to the cashew. So I mentioned the white beans as an alternative to the nuts. You could also use, if you wanted to use walnuts or Brazil nuts, those both have a good amount of fat that would give you that creamy finish. The cashews aren't as grainy as some other nuts, so you may end up with a little bit grainier end product. You could probably even use almonds. I haven't tried that, but you would get more of a thicker end product. So I haven't tried this with different nuts, but I think you could certainly incorporate other nuts. Was that your understanding of the question, Jessica?
Yep, I think that should do it. And then I know that you mentioned that nutritional yeast. Where have you purchased that in the past? Yeah,
so I have found that at our local Walmart has it, and it is in the health food section there. But I've also seen it at stores in the baking section. And it's the brand at grocery stores is typically Bragg's Nutritional Yeast, Braggs, is the brand that it comes in. And I think it comes in like a 4.5-ounce container. You can also, of course, find it online. If you're an Amazon shopper, it can be found there in bigger quantities. And so that's certainly an option.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing those. So I will go ahead and launch this last poll that we have. If you do have other questions, feel free to keep sending them our way and we can kind of answer those as we're going through this poll. What is one action that you plan to take from today's webinar? Got a lot of different choices on here. So Natalie gave us plenty of different ideas. So swapping processed snack foods for whole, minimally processed foods, portioning out snacks, checking in on hunger before trying to snack, avoiding mindless eating, looking up nutritional information, and then of course trying that plant-based queso dip. So while people are voting, I can go ahead and give a couple more questions if you don't mind, Natalie.
Yeah, that's great.
So I will say some people submitted questions prior to today's webinar, which was excellent when you signed up. So I've got a couple of those that I can go through here. So someone said, I'm a chip person, need a healthy alternative that is salty, crunchy taste. Any suggestions?
Yeah, so crunchy and salty, something that's going to be much more nutrient dense and filling is going to be like some roasted and salted nuts or even some raw nuts, give you that nice crunch. They now even sell those roasted chickpeas, which some people have gravitated towards as a way to get some beans in because those are salty and crunchy. Air pop popcorn is another one that's a great option. Some people will make air pop popcorn and spritz it with a little bit of like white wine vinegar to put salt on if they're trying to stay away from the oily popcorn. So those are some examples that come to mind.
Perfect. All right, well, I know the poll is probably covering up Natalie and we want to be able to see her. So I will go ahead and end that polling and launch those results and then we can keep going with some of these questions. So Natalie, I'll let you kind of go over the results.
Yes, thank you. So we've got across the board here. So swapping processed food for whole, minimally processed foods, 18%, portion out my snacks, 10%. So yeah, maybe portioning them out before you eat them or even, for the full week. Checking in on my hunger before snacking, 22%. I think that that's a tip that a lot of people can incorporate. Avoid the mindless eating and snacking. That was our highest one. Looking up nutritional information, 3%, and then trying the plant-based queso dip. I'm excited to see that about 22% of you, will be the recipes. So Jessica will be sending that out afterwards.
Perfect. Well, I will say some of the questions that we had come in were talking about, what do I do for my stress eating? And so I think what you've gone over, Natalie, with that, avoiding the mindless eating, checking in with yourself to see if you're truly hungry or if you're just trying to fill kind of an emotional void, definitely will help people with that.
Absolutely. And one other piece that I'll add to that, whatever is in your house is what you generally eat. So when we're hungry for a snack, we might really want chips, but we might not want them enough to drive to town and go in the store and get those chips. So being mindful of what's available to you and making sure that there's healthy snacks around. You'd probably be more likely to choose some raw almonds rather than the chips if that's what's available to you.
Yeah, for me, it certainly seems easier to say no when I'm at the store versus when I'm standing in front of my pantry. So
absolutely.
Perfect. Well, I know we are at the bottom of the hour. Just looking through some other questions. I know that Natalie kind of went through some of these grab and go solutions and things like that. So now we will have the educational handout and the recipe will come out after today. I will send that. It might be tomorrow, I will say, but we'll get that to you as soon as we can. But then we also wanted to just quickly let you know about our next wellbeing webinar. So every month we are doing a wellbeing webinar for you, and it's always on a Thursday. So I have a typo on here. This is my fault, Natalie. I didn't tell you correctly, but it's going to be Thursday in April, and I believe that is the 15th. We're actually going to have Dr. Fingerhut is our clinical psychologist here, He's going to be talking about finding your life's flow and living a life that feels good. So I think a lot of times we go through life and there's so much going on that sometimes it's hard to get out of that rut, if you will. So it'll be great to hear from Dr. Fingerhut about finding your life's flow. So more to come. There will be another registration link as we get closer to that. So again, Natalie, thank you so much for the presentation. Everything will be sent out to everybody after today. Have a great afternoon and a great rest of your morning.
Thanks everyone for joining us.